Yeah, it's got electrolytes.
What are electrolytes? Do you even know?
It's what they use to make Brondo.
Yeah, but why did they use them to make Brondo?
Because Brondo's got electrolytes.
Hi, folks. It's your old pal, Double D, giving you your OGL/ORC license roundup. At various times in the last week or so, I have felt like old Luke Wilson there, trying to figure out whether or not we actually need these all-encompassing gaming licenses. Sometimes the answers are no more helpful than they were in that clip. I thought I'd shoot on a couple of different aspects of this and give you my opinion on them. So as we all know, in response to the OGL screw-up and subsequent backpedal by Wizards of the Coast, Paizo's entered the fray with their ORC license, an open content license that is system agnostic. And I think I might have sussed out that this just means that anyone using the license will be able to make third-party products for whoever signs up under it. I'm still also a little confused on some of the points, one of which is how Paizo can just pop in another license in regards to their Pathfinder 2.0 when it still uses the OGL 1.0. These are things, I guess, for smarter minds than I to figure out. We also have this issue that the rats at Wizards of the Coast threw into their proposed license 1.1 of being able to deny the use of that license for hateful speech. Of course, the immediate question any person with a skeptical mind asks is, who decides what's hateful? Now, in their surrender statement, Wizards of the Coast shamelessly put that as the overarching reason for the OGL update. Something even the SJWs didn't buy. But the cat is out of the bag, and as we all know, the philosophical difference between the employees at Wizards of the Coast and Paizo is not very much. You know, they're both in Seattle, both have historically a leftist political bent. The question a lot of us immediately started to ask ourselves when Paizo announced the ORC license concept is, will they incorporate a similar hate speech clause into it? Given the closeness of political thought, I think it's a fair question. I don't think I need to tell you, but I think it would be a huge mistake. It would not be there to keep out hate speech. It would be there to promote pro-leftist talking points. I mean, would orcs be allowed to be wholly evil in any products under a license containing this clause? Pronouns necessary for NPC stats? If that stuff sounds far-fetched to you, ask yourself if, even 10 years ago, you'd have ever seen a Supreme Court nominee in their hearing refuse to define what a woman is. But that's where we're at. We're already in crazy land, so everything is on the table. So in relation to all this, I found a recent tweet from RPG Pundit pretty interesting. I'll put it up here. Here he is saying that a source tells him that the Seattle Soviet is currently being formed, probably in regards to this whole hate speech issue. Pretty quick, however, Eric Mona of Paizo came in to deny all of that very forcefully, saying it was completely wrong. It's hard to say who's right. Obviously, Eric Mona is on the inside of Paizo, but he's also a bit of a weasel who would most likely endorse any sort of clause like that. Even Jessica Price, the most hateful person in gaming, called him a weak man. So we shall see in the coming days what is true and what is not. I do hope that you are realizing, even though we may have been allied for a time with our crazy blue-haired enemies against Wizards of the Coast, it will not be for long. These folks would relish some sort of anti-free speech clause. They are profoundly incurious people who know little to nothing about history and the dangers inherent when you suppress speech and thought. Maybe Paizo will surprise us and leave this clause out of their ORC license, and if they do, good on them. But don't go all in just yet. you may end up regretting it. We also had OGL creator Ryan Dancey weighing in on this whole issue. Ryan did it with his customary humbleness, as you can see, pretty much taking sole credit for saving D&D at its low ebb. But I did find a few sections of his blog post kind of interesting. The leverage that the company, Wizards of the Coast, believed it had was their perception that they had the right to deauthorize and revoke the 1.0 version of the license. They do not, he says. Attempting to do so will result in difficult litigation. Not sure what that means, but ultimately poses a risk to Wizards of the Coast's fundamental conception of what it can copyright and protect with U.S. intellectual property right laws. In other words, he's saying, let sleeping dogs lie. If you've ever heard in court, someone anxious to get someone into court so they can do discovery. I think that's sort of what he's talking about here. It may end up backfiring spectacularly if they litigate this. He also went through and defined what the OGL actually allows in layman's terms. The OGL is a contract. In exchange for gaining the legal right to use, modify, and distribute open game content, users of the license agree not to use product identity in their works unless otherwise authorized by a separate agreement. All the core trademarks of Dungeons & Dragons, including the trademark on Dungeons & Dragons itself, were clearly identified as product identity in the work Wizards of the Coast published using the OGL, which means that no third party without a valid license is allowed to use those brands and trademarks in any work licensed with the OGL without Wizards' explicit permission. He goes on to say that it's therefore not legal for anyone to mint D&D NFTs, as was said in the draft version of their 1.1, or exploit Wizards' intellectual property with the OGL. No revision to the OGL is needed to ensure that those protections exist. And I actually do appreciate this kind of precise and straightforward insight. Though I should say that I think Ryan occasionally thinks he's an expert in areas he probably isn't. He has one post on his blog about how people should structure their companies for tax purposes. I am a tax professional myself, and I found it a tad incomplete. Almost like he just read a few things and presented himself as an expert. But here, I think at least he probably did get into the legal framework of the OGL when it was being written. So I'm apt to trust, whatever he says on this issue, at least. Finally, I was a little curious about the author of the original article at Gizmodo, which started this whole firestorm, Linda Codega. Yeah, Linda Codega is a trans person, and I did a little looking into her Twitter history, just for the heck of it. This is what I found. Look, it's clear the article was slanted against Wizards of the Coast, and nobody really cared, including me. They were obviously in the wrong. But I also just wanted to show you, if you're a straight white guy, this person probably does not think too much of you. In 1945, the Soviet Union and the Western Allies met on the Elba River, cutting the Germans in two. The link-up was powerful visually to show that the war was just about over. In less than a year, those same troops were lined up across from each other, more or less as enemies. Look, just because we all wanted the bad guys, in this case Wizards of the Coast, to lose, don't lose sight of the fact that many of the people we were cheering with are erstwhile allies at best. They believe in safety tools, censorship, and perverting the game to reflect flavor of the day politics. They are still the enemy. Do not forget this. If you want to play Pathfinder because you like Pathfinder, and the system that it's based on, knock yourself out. I've said before, we did for a couple of years. But don't think you have to somehow just to support them for being the kind of company, I hate to say they always have been, which is expedient opportunists. I suppose if ORC comes out and there's no censorship clause, it could be benign or a slightly positive instrument. But in my opinion, this all can just as easily be accomplished by the individual companies signing up for it, having a policy of their own for third-party submissions. That's all we're really talking about here. People are thinking this is the Magna Carta or something. And I'm always just a little slightly confused and bemused by that. But this issue is not going anywhere, so I will continue to give you my thoughts on it as it develops. Thanks again for watching. If you like this kind of content and want to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So you guys have a great, great day. And until we talk again, take care.
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody.